It's business news for the culture to close the financial and racial wealth gap in this country. The way that we pitch it to investors is that when minorities don't see themselves in the content, they're less likely, right, to take action. And that's across the board. It's not even just a content specific thing. It's even apply for jobs, right, if you don't see anyone that looks like you. And so we really are trying to dive into this is why there's this problem exists, and this is what CultureBanx is fixing. So let me give you an example.
Okay.
Last year, for example, Michael Kors bought Versace for about $3 billion. A lot of people say, okay, that's an interesting M&A deal, but what does that really look like in terms of your community and your core values? Well, Versace's biggest consumer group actually happens to be minorities. That actually happens to be the hip hop community, and because they've had a long-standing love affair with hip hop, Michael Kors wants a bigger stake with that community, right? So this makes sense on a lot of different fronts. And music-wise, the song that is associated with that particular article is a song by the rap group Migos featuring Drake, which is titled Versace, where they just repeat the word Versace a lot of times in the song.
Like, I think it would be good in the deck to show an example of maybe a paragraph, a couple different paragraphs of content, and how maybe it would be framed differently.
Okay.
And really appeal to that audience.
Do you mean as in a comparison type of way? Like this article?
Yeah, like something happened in the news, like, Walmart just announced earnings.
Okay.
And
right.
CNBC and Jim Cramer talks about it this way. Take that content, you see, and then this is our spin on it. And you see how that we relate to this demo in a way that's really unique.
Do you think that would be too wordy? That's my only thing. I've always been told, like, try to keep the words as light as possible.
I think you should have so few words.
Okay.
However, there are a couple cases where wording really makes sense. And I think, unfortunately, like, you're in the words business. So if you were in the picture business, it'd be really easy. But you're in the words business.
Right.
One thing I don't see here is the unit economics of, like, your cost to acquire a buyer, and then how much lifetime revenue or profit you think you're going to get from each impression, customer.
That CAC to LV, a part of the problem with why it's not included is because we haven't done any what I consider like paid marketing. Like everything's been very grassroots since we're so bootstrapped. So part of it is that we're not exactly sure at this point how we fully value, right, that sort of customer acquisition cost, which I think is more of something that we're trying to figure out with some upcoming paid marketing and kind of turning that around. And of course, with the events business as well, like how much is it going to cost us to get people to buy tickets and that sort of stuff.
I think even having thought through it and working back and saying, like, here's how much revenue we think we can get per customer based on some early traction, extrapolating, that means we could afford to spend X dollars to get a customer, and the math works. We don't know how many customers we can get below whatever it is, a $30 CAC, but we know we will get some. And so what you have to believe is, how big is this market? How many people can we get at below a $30 CAC? Here's the reasons why we're confident we can. So it's just kind of like showing that you know the model and you know the importance of the CAC to LTV relationship. You got some early traction, so you could probably project out what you think lifetime value of a customer is by extrapolating. And say, somewhere in this range based on early stats, here's how much we could afford to spend on CAC. And by the way, our lifetime value is higher than would be typical because we're so targeted. And then show, okay, so based on this revenue, lifetime revenue, here's what we could afford to spend to acquire that customer. And then here's why we think that's reasonable. And then you can say, well, we're just starting to spend now, but we've got a lot of room. And we've already done some tests, and we've been under that, and try to get people confident that you know the relationship and you know how to monetize and bring customers in. That's a really important part of this that's missing right now.
But I want to ask you some questions about pitching. Okay. So let's say the deck is now beautiful and perfect, as perfect as it's going to be. For me, going into a room, pitching a company to lots of white male investors that is not a part of their world, and then also to a niche sort of media demographic, right? That also plays a role. And not just because it's servicing African Americans, but media in itself is run by men. it's just a lot of, I think, to your point, like we don't understand.
Just based on you just saying that, a couple of things that I said, I think will really help. So first is getting that feel. So both having the way in which news is reported now, and then the way in which you report it, I think would be a good feel to get a sense of like, what are you talking about?
Okay.
I think, secondly, the video. I think showing that it is a pain point and listening to consumers, I think will resonate, because you're right, people just wouldn't inherently get it. And then the third thing is really dissecting the market so that the audience, the VCs, understand how big this demographic is with respect to ad dollars, and how you're then well positioned to go after and get a really large chunk of that.
Now that you know our business model, and you definitely understand it very, very well,
Okay.
what's one thing that you would change about it?
I've noticed that people prefer much shorter content than that long form stuff that used to be before. They like it in snippets, and also video and podcasts, like voice and video are a lot more popular now. So I think moving into a direction where you've got shorter form content, video, voice, you've got music that you said to support it. I think moving in that direction is kind of where the puck's already started to go.
Do you think a better deck is really that's going to help move the needle?
Oh yeah, I
Okay.
think
I
think the deck and the pitch is 80-90% of it.
Okay.
And the founder, of course,
Right.
and you as the founder, the deck and the pitch together. How well you know the deck, the answers to the questions, how clear you are on what your value prop is, how big the market is, how you differentiate, how you're going to execute it, all those things. That's so important. Lots of people will come in and have the same idea. You have to just assume that there's lots of people thinking about this idea, have a deck on it, or pitching it even. How do you stand out? How do you get the capital? Because very few people will get capital for their idea. It's just low probability.
Right.
And my goal is to just help you and give you a higher probability of getting funded. And I do think the
What do we
deck and your ability to and command over the information is going to make the difference.
Okay, I know that you have 2 daughters, and you seem to be passionate about female founders, but if you didn't have 2 daughters, do you think you'd still have that same type of passion to helping out women entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I definitely would. Yeah, I mean, certainly helps to have 2 daughters, but I think my primary motivation here is just I see that there's an inequity in the system, and just want to help, give back and do what I can to help make it more an equal playing field. And I've noticed a lot of unconscious bias. I've pitched hundreds of VCs over the last decade, and I've listened to others, females, minorities, pitch VCs and tell me about how the pitch went, show me the deck. And I definitely feel like something doesn't feel quite right. It doesn't seem quite fair. So I just wanted to do my small part in helping to balance that out a bit.
Well,
basically.
we definitely need some advocates, so I'm glad that you're here and that I can talk to you.
Any unconscious bias you're sensing or feeling from any of the investors at this point?
Yes, and sometimes I'm not sure which way it's coming from. I don't know if it's because I'm a female founder, if I'm a founder of color. I feel like there are a lot of things. I'm youngish. So sometimes I'm not sure like which button I'm like triggering people on. So I feel it because when I've worked in the media space and I have this very strong credentialed financial background where I've worked at other media companies and a media startup that's been very successful with people that did not have any of that going into it, and they've gone on to raise tens of millions of dollars, and perhaps their deck was in a much better shape, I'm sure it probably was, than what I brought today. But I definitely feel as though it's kind of like, had you been born in a different body, this would be a different conversation. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate.
It is.
But also a good thing, because change is up to us.
Yeah.
And I think that with my company, we're going to be able to really make a difference in a lot of different communities around the world.
I think you have the opportunity to make a really big difference in so many people's lives, and I wish you the best of luck. And hopefully, if there's anything I do to help, let me know.